Hello guys and gals, and welcome back to another episode of Haunted Gaming. This time, we have a Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time creepypasta called Cheat and Play, so with that being said, sit back and enjoy, but definitely don't be cheating and playing. I know this may sound strange, but I just recently came across this creepypasta website and all the terrifying stories it provides. I know what you're thinking, but yes, I do use the internet. However, when I do, I try to steer clear of forums, which is what I assumed creepypasta was when I first heard about it, just a bunch of strangers conversing about ghost stories via web. Boy, was I dead wrong. It's only been about a month or so, and I've already spent hours upon hours reading the more popular stories, and although most are indeed terrifying, there are some I feel are a bit ridiculous, especially the ones using the beloved TV shows, The Simpsons, SpongeBob, etc. Even the video game stories are a bit ludicrous to me, Sonic.exe and a few of the Pokemon stories to name a few. However, there was one video game story that chilled me to the bone, one I felt could possibly be true. I am referring to the infamous Ben Drowned creepypasta story, and the reason why I feel it could be a true story is because something similarly creepy happened to me while I was playing the Ocarina of Time a few years ago. See, I love playing Zelda games, especially Ocarina of Time. I know the Ben Drowned story is based upon Majora's Mask, but both games are very similar to me. I prefer playing Ocarina of Time, and it is one of my favorite games. I've played hours upon hours roaming Hyrule, collecting rupees and fighting countless enemies in order to save Princess Zelda, and as I grew older, the game was still a joy to play, but sometimes after beating it over and over again, you just want to take the easy way out and dick around, right? Yeah, I'm talking about cheat codes, ladies and gents, and it was after coming across an odd cheat code on the web where my story does begin. Let me start off by saying I hardly ever use them. I prefer to play games from beginning to end with just my raw ability to kick animated ass. To some of you that may sound dumb, but I feel that you connect more with the game if you actually have to put some effort and thought into it. However, it was also after using the cheat code for Ocarina of Time that I have sworn against using them ever again. I know many of you are curious as to what happened after I used the cheat code, but don't worry, just keep reading. I'll tell you everything. I found the cheat code for Ocarina of Time when I was 14. I was at my dad's when it happened, vacationing for the summer in rural Michigan. My parents are divorced, and since I'm also his child as much as my mother's, I was forced to go visit him and his new family every summer and winter break. However, for the summer I had to stay with him for 6 weeks, which meant that I could not hang out with my friends at all during summer break. It sucked, and so I found solace in video games, and for hours at a time. I would play various games in the basement where none of my family ventured. In Michigan, that family included the following people: his wife, now ex-wife, thank God, and my two younger brothers, Andy and Zachariah. My brothers were far too young for the time to be playing video games, which is why I set up the Nintendo system downstairs. I prefer complete silence when I play video games. There's nothing more annoying than a bunch of young boys jumping onto your back and inquiring about what you're doing every few seconds. Plus, no one could hear me scream obscenities when I died or lost a level, which was good, because I did a lot of rage screaming back then. Therefore, the basement was the only place in the house where I could truly be happy. It may have been creepy, dark, and damp, but it was quiet, and that was all that mattered to me. It was nearly midnight when I searched, or Googled rather, the cheat code for the game. I planned on starting a new game, and I wasn't looking forward to Kokiri Forest and dealing with all that. Wandering the forest and meeting up with the Deku Tree may be fun to some, but not to me. The best part of the game, in my opinion, was wandering Hyrule and seeing all the different places. Also, I loved exploring Hyrule Castle and meeting Princess Zelda for the first time. I know, I'm such a girl. Anyways, I just wanted to skip the beginning of the game, somehow, and jump right into Hyrule. And I figured there had to be a cheat code that would do that. I mean, there were cheat codes for everything else, so why wouldn't there be one for what I needed? I searched for a useful code for nearly 20 minutes, hoping to find some way to skip past the beginning of the game. The results were, unfortunately, unhelpful. Then, to my surprise, when I finally decided to give up and just play through Kokiri, an odd link popped up in the search engine. The link name read Cheat and Play, and it was displayed just like that, in all caps. I didn't remember coming across a link before, and when I checked what page number I was currently on, my jaw dropped slightly from shock. I was back on page 1. However, I knew that couldn't be possible as I've been searching for almost 30 minutes. I had to be on at least page 50 by now, though what was most unsettling about it all was that the link had appeared out of nowhere. The other weird thing was that the link had no description underneath, just a web address. It was really weird. It freaked me out, to say the least, and so I jumped to the next page of the results. Oddly enough, the search result was there again. I just stared at the large letters, dumbfounded. How could I have missed this link before? The letter seemed to pop off the screen, and the longer I stared at the link, the more inclined I was to find out what the website was. So, after a short inner debate, I threw caution to the wind and clicked on the link. and opened it. Took a few minutes for the site to open, although this had happened only a few years ago. The time it took for the page to load seemed abnormal. I began to worry instantly, wondering if it was some type of spam site, and I tried to exit it out. I don't want to download any viruses on the computer. It was my father's, and I didn't want her to be angry with me for screwing it up. The window wouldn't close, though. It remained open. This empty white screen with the words cheat and play displayed across the top bar. Even trying to close the browser and task manager wouldn't work. Ultimately, I ended up sitting there, staring at the monitor, praying for the website to be clean and legit, and then suddenly, the website finally appeared. It was pretty plain looking. It had a basic black background with the title Cheat and Play at the top of the page and what looked to be a bright red impact font. There were only 4 small links displayed in the middle of the page too. They were also in a red impact font as well. I had a choice between Super Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I thought it was odd that the site only had cheat codes for Nintendo 64 games, which were quite old at this point in time. The PS2 and Xbox were already released. However, I didn't give it much thought, as I should have. Although my game was listed on the page, I didn't jump out of the chair with enthusiasm just yet. After all, I'd spent about half an hour searching for a code, and although I'd come across many websites with cheat codes for the game, there hadn't been for any for jumping levels. Even though I wasn't expecting results, I clicked the link, waited patiently for it to load, and this time, surprisingly, the page loaded in just a matter of seconds. And there in the middle of the web page were 4 more choices. This time I could choose between infinite health, infinite rupees, unlockable costumes, and level jumping. My eyes brightened when I read the last one. Finally, I found the cheat I was in dire need of. In my overzealous state, I completely forgot about how strange the site was when I clicked on the link. On that page, there was an image of a young Link smiling with a sword raised high in the air, but underneath the image were the instructions and the actual cheat code. The instructions explained that after opening the game and walking inside the treehouse, I had to press the following buttons: right, left, yellow triangle, press the B button twice, and hold A and the right trigger. After doing so, a small cave would open in the room on the right side of Link's bed. Once it appeared, I had to walk through it, and it would take me all the way to Hyrule Field. I was ecstatic, and so, after writing down the code on the side of my palm, I went to close the browser. It was then that I noticed a line of text directly underneath the code. I hadn't seen it before, or at least I hadn't thought so. It was smaller than the text of the instructions, and I had to peer closer to the monitor to even comprehend it. But when I did, the text read: the cheat code may cause complications and or glitches to your gameplay. Play at your own risk. I wonder why the last line was in all caps, but I figured the creator of the site was just trying to warn the players that it could potentially harm the game. I don't need the warning though. And with one last look at the image of the smiling Link, I closed the browser, left the room, eager to begin playing. Now when I finally sat down to play, it was nearly 1 in the morning. I didn't mind. I was a young teenager and I stay up rather late. It was summer after all, and I love not having to wake up early. Besides, nothing beats late night video game playing anyways. So I turned the television and the game system on, and once I'd settled back in my papa's chair, I started a new game, named the file Zelda, which I know sounds odd, renaming Link Zelda, but oh well, that's just what I named it that night. The game opened up as it always did, with Link dreaming in the Deku Tree ordering Navi to go find the boy without the fairy. I waited patiently, reading the lines I had read at least a dozen times before. I'd played the game so much in my short lifetime that I could practically recite the Deku Tree's words. Then finally, it was time for me to wake up. Navi introduced herself, explained that the Deku Tree had summoned me, and I jumped out of the bed. My pulse raced with excitement at this point, and I glanced down in my palm and followed the commands. As soon as I input the code, the secret jingle that I'm so very familiar of, and I'm sure you guys are too, rang out as part of the wall next to Link's bed disappeared. There in the wall was a small black opening. My jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it actually worked. I walked towards the new opening, eager to find out where it took me, but when I did, Navi began flying around me frantically. "Hey, listen!" she kept saying over and over again. I tried moving away from her, but she followed me wherever I went. It was actually quite annoying. I wondered if she had something important to tell me, something pertaining to the cheat code, but whenever Navi would try to talk, only lines of dots would appear, scrolling across the screen slowly. I waited to see if she would eventually tell me something, but she never did. I quickly grew tired of listening to her scream, "Hey, listen!" And after managed to maneuver around her hovering form, I walked through the dark hole in the wall. Now what happened next was really strange. After walking through the opening, I was brought to what appeared to be a great fairy fountain. The familiar pretty music was playing, and I spotted 2 large stone pillars at the far end of the room by the large pool. I also noticed there were 2 torches resting on top of the pillars, but the flames were extinguished. I was confused about why I had ended up here. I'd remembered that the website explained that after inputting the cheat and entering and opening the wall, I would end up in Hyrule Field. However, I was still intrigued by what had just occurred and wanted to see what would happen if I kept playing. At this point I wasn't scared, I simply figured the game had glitched because of that code. I glanced around my surroundings once more, realizing that something was different here. Instead of the usual bright and beautiful fountain area, the place I now found myself was in a dark and damp area. There were puddles of water all over the top floor, which was cracked and smeared with these ugly black streaks, and as I grew closer to the pool of water, the music suddenly ceased playing. It was dead quiet, save for my loud footsteps as I grew nearer. Then suddenly the two torches blazed with fire and I dropped the controller into my lap from surprise. The fairy's laughter echoed the room, catching me off guard and causing my skin to sprout goosebumps. I waited for her to appear before me in an empty fountain, but she didn't. Instead, the screen grew darker, and I couldn't help but gasp when Navi started swirling around me again. Her voice even more shrill than usual as she shouted, "Hey, watch out." That's when I really began to freak out. If this was a glitch, it was seriously disturbing. I turned around, hoping to find a way out, but when I did, I just came face to face with that fountain again. No matter which way I turned, the empty fountain of water appeared before me. And after a few minutes of this, my fear quickly melted away when I realized I had nothing to be afraid of. I'm just playing a stupid game. There's no reason for me to freak out. If anything, I could just restart, and that's what I ultimately decided on doing. I'd reboot the system and start the game over without using the cheat. It was simple enough. As soon as I made the move to slide off my chair and turn the game on, the Great Fairy's laughter had returned, but this time the speed of it was slowed down. The sound was eerie and menacing, and I froze. Now in an awkward position with half of my butt hanging off the edge of the chair and my right arm reaching out towards the N64, a red streak had flashed across the screen, startling me, and the fairy appeared in the fountain, except this fairy wasn't the usual Great Fairy I was accustomed to meeting. The fairy hovering above the fountain was absolutely evil-looking. Her usual bright hair was now a deep black, and although her body was covered in those typical green vines, her arms, legs, and torso were decorated with what looked like to be red handprints. Her skin was paler than it should have been, and there were deep red circles underneath her eyes, which were both large and vacant of any color but white. I was frightened by her appearance, but more so of the large creepy grin displayed on her face. She giggled in that same high-pitched tone and spread her arms out as if she was getting at me with a secret ability or item. I waited patiently for her to say something, but she didn't. She just stared, her vacant white eyes gazing down at Link as she hovered in midair. And after a few minutes of this odd silence, I picked up my controller and forced Link to turn his back to her. I couldn't bear looking at her grotesque appearance any longer. However, after I did that, another red streak flashed across the screen, and a loud rumble echoed in the room. I tried moving Link away from the fountain, but when I touched the joystick, my character spun around and was forced to face the fairy once more. She's looming over me now in what appeared to be this very uncomfortable position. Her shoulders bent inwards, her head jutted out at me. I sifted a scream as I stared at the disturbing image of the fairy on screen. She was smiling at me again, but this time her dark brows were narrowed menacingly. An eerie and quiet minute passed before the fairy asked, "Aren't you going to play the song for me first?" I was too freaked out to move, and I was beyond confused. Besides, I just started the game. I don't have an ocarina yet, so how the hell was I supposed to play a song for her? I waited patiently, hoping she would fade away or disappear somehow. After all, this fountain was a glitch. Maybe she herself would glitch and vanish. I don't know why, but I just didn't try to turn the game off then. I should have, but I simply stared at the screen and waited to see what was happening. I know some of you may have a hard time believing what I'm about to tell you, but the fairy seemed to grow angry when I didn't attempt to play anything. Her smile drooped into a scowl, and her eyebrows seemed to narrow even more drastically. "Aren't you going to play a song for me first?" she asked again, this time in a tone that sent a chill down my spine. I realized that I had to at least attempt to play the fairy a song before she grew even more scary than she already was. Although my character seemed frozen to the spot, I was able to open the items menu and search through my wares. I figured I'd find nothing there. After all, like I said before, I hadn't even played the game yet, so there was no way I could have picked anything up. Once the item screen popped up, though, I screamed. There in the first slot was an ocarina, and not just any ocarina either. It was a black ocarina. I didn't know what to do after seeing that there. I was so traumatized at this point that I just wanted to turn the game off and never play it again. That's when I reached out and switched off the console. I breathed a huge sigh of relief as the television screen turned black, and all my life, I'd never been so thankful to see a blank television screen. That is, until it began flickering, displaying an eerie static on the screen. I stared at the TV in disbelief, tears sprinting to my eyes when the game reappeared on the screen. "This can't be real," I'd muttered that night, wrapping my arms and my body for comfort. "This can't be happening." The fairy, who had been staring at Link the entire time since her arrival to the fountain, was now staring directly at me. Her white eyes were abnormally wide and her mouth was opened, as if she was shouting. And it was then that I realized Navi was sitting on Link's shoulder, hiding behind the blonde hair. I could make out, sounds of her whimpering. "Play me a song," the evil fairy suddenly screamed, and I fell back against my papasan chair, absolutely terrified. My heart was hammering in my chest from fear, and when I realized I had no choice but to play a song, I selected the black ocarina from the menu. I chose to play the Song of Time, my favorite ocarina tune. The song sounded out normal at first, and then it was slowed, and I cringed while listening to the horrid noise. The great fairy seemed troubled by my selection, and she simply shook her head. "No, not right," was all she said. She turned her head around to face me again, but this time she held out her arms. Then, the Learn a New Song box opened, and an unknown song appeared on the screen. It was titled The Song of Death. The yellow arrows appeared on screen, and she stared down at me with an expectant expression. She wanted me to play the song for her. I'd never heard of the song before, and I was pretty sure there wasn't any actual Song of Death in the Ocarina of Time, which only caused me to worry even more. If I played the song, what would happen? Would the game end? Would I be let free? I pondered all of these questions, but I decided I didn't really have a choice but to play it. I followed the direction of the yellow arrows: top, right, top, left, left, down, top, down, 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 right, left, top. The song was absolutely horrifying. It didn't sound like a normal ocarina song at all, and I wrapped my arms around my body to keep myself from trembling. All this while it was taking place, I pondered the idea that I was simply having a nightmare. Unfortunately, I was not so lucky. When I was disturbed by the song, the fairy was overjoyed. She did a backflip in midair, giggling happily as the music played. What happened next caused me to scream and cover my eyes. The great fairy suddenly froze, her usual creepy grin displayed on her face. Her arms had opened wide, her legs bent upward as would look to be 90 degrees. Another red streak flashed across my TV screen, and the fairy was now lying face down in the fountain. And that fountain didn't contain water or anything, it was full of blood that seemed to flow over the edges. I simply stared at the violent image on screen. I was unable to move, I was in complete shock. Suddenly, an unfamiliar and deep voice shouted, "Get out!" And a bright white light was shown into the room. I grinned when the rainbow teleportation pad that every fairy fountain was supposedly, was supposed to possess in the game appeared next to me. Finally, I was free of this horrible place. I wasted no time. I hurried onto the pad and Link was teleported out of the horrible room. However, the pad didn't take me to Hyrule Field or to Link's bedroom. It didn't take me anywhere. The screen just went black, and after a moment or so, the sentence, "Don't cheat," was typed out on the screen, just before the game returned to the original opening. My eyes watering from fright at what I'd just seen, and my mind was reeling with skepticism. The game had known I'd been cheating all along. How was that even possible? And more importantly, was it trying to teach me a lesson by putting me through that devastating ordeal? I ultimately decided that it didn't matter. I was just relieved from the disturbing experience, and it was over. Ever since that night, though, I'd refused to use cheat codes. Readers, if you come across this website while in search for a cheat code for your game, please heed my words. If you go looking for it, you will find it eventually, and trust me, it's not worth it. You don't want to copy or try these codes out for yourself, and if you do, you will regret it. Well, this was another Zelda Creepypasta, and it's been quite some time. And before I begin, nice mention with Bent Round. Love that shit. But moving on, it had a pretty good method in its structure, and by that I mean that it had a beginning, middle, and an end, and it pretty much stuck to all three of them with equal love. And it paces through it successfully, although, I mean, even though I said it paces through it with equal love, I did see that it focused a lot on the backstory, which a lot of creepypastas do, so, and this wasn't really as bad as some of the other ones we've read. Now, the build-up was a tad lackluster because although we've built up the code and finding it on the internet for, quite some time, and then coming across this website, yada yada yada, and then inputting it in, I hoped it would have been more creative with the endeavors rather than just giving us doorway and, room. I mean, it's nice to go to the fairy fountain, and I'll be honest, it feels like the events could happen, and the picture was a nice touch inside there too. And it seemed like nothing that the game couldn't handle, because you know how in gaming creepypasta sometimes something so weird can happen with a certain game that you'll never even envision it happen. And it becomes laughable, like, say for example, some, hardcore 3D rendering occurred in Pokemon Yellow. You're just like, that can't happen. That's not even possible at all. And it would have been better just to use this awkward sprite and these weird, binaural notes in it. As this thankfully manages to avoid that, but it does have a fault. There really can't be a code like this, and it even shows the code here, and when you enter it, shocker, it doesn't really happen, which honestly kills a creepypasta for me. And I know these are supposed to be fake, but, you know, I'm usually the person that is very skeptical, and I give it a shot, and if it doesn't work, I can't really take the literature seriously, but again, that is just me, personal opinions. It really sticks to the cliches, and honestly, at times, I'm not gonna lie, it does get pretty grating, but again, that's just me after reading so many creepypastas as well, so maybe it hits me more than the average reader. But in the end, I thought this was kind of meh. You know, it had the structure and some build-up, but unlike Ben Drowned, where that really pushes the envelope and keeps its believability, this one just didn't try at all, and I mean, it didn't even try to get past the first steps, and you know, then again, if I just ask you, what would you rate this and what would you change to make it better? I mean, I've given you my opinion on it. I just felt this could have pushed a little bit further, a lot further actually, and given us a really nice Ocarina of Time creepypasta. And this has been another episode of Haunted Gaming, and if you like what you saw, then like, comment, and subscribe. This is me, Mudaharan. I am out.